there, my name's Caitlin Bandy, and this is my channel, BandysBooks. Today we're here to talk about my August TBR. And first, just let me say, can you believe it's already August? I am just mind blown. This year is going so fast, it just does not want to let up. 2022, it's like every time I blink, another month passes. I can't believe that we're almost 3/4 of the year through already. So, with that said, typically going into my TBRs, I pick a specific genre or a theme that I focus on for the entire month. If you've followed my channel for any length of time, you've probably seen my other TBR videos and noticed that, I usually tend to stick within one genre for a whole month. Over the summer, I decided I was going to give myself a little bit of a break because while I do love focusing on a genre or a theme for a month, I also do really love mood reading, and sometimes it's nice to just be able to pick up whatever I feel like reading. So I gave myself what I'm calling a summer break, and through the months of the summer, I'm just reading what I please. I'm still setting up a TBR of like 20 books that I want to get through, but you'll see in my TBR here that my books are across all sorts of genres. It's a very, very diverse set of books, both in genre, authors, themes, etc. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to tell you briefly about each book. There's 21 books here, so I don't want to go into extensive detail and end up with a 3-hour video. We all know I'm already pretty chatty as it is, so just gonna try and keep it short on each one. The first book that I have is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This was a book that my mom gave me. She read it and she wasn't that excited about it, but I've heard really good reviews. It's kind of one of those books I think that you either really love or aren't so hot on. And so I wanted to read it for myself and see where I stand. All I really know about this book is that it's about a guy that's trapped inside of a house, wandering around the house trying to find a way out or something. That's all I want to know about it. I've heard that it's best to go into this book with limited information. So Piranesi is on the list. I know a lot of booktubers have really enjoyed this, and I know a lot of bookstagrammers who have also really enjoyed it, so I'm hoping that I'll be on that end of the spectrum as well. After that, I have The Librarian of Auschwitz by Antonio Iturbe, which is translated by Lilith Zekulin Thwaites. This is a book that is in the historical fiction genre, specifically WW2 era. This is about a young girl whose family gets moved into a ghetto originally and then is eventually transported to Auschwitz. At Auschwitz, she is trusted by some prisoners with 8 books that have been smuggled into the camp. They're the only 8 books within the camp, and she essentially becomes Librarian of Auschwitz. I think this is going to be a tearjerker. I love historical fiction. It's one of the genres that I tend to read the most, and I would say of any era, I probably read WW2 more than anything. It is a tough era to read because of the Holocaust, because of, the Russian gulags, because of, the Japanese campaign through Asia. There's just a lot of really difficult moments, but one of the things I specifically love about WW2 era is that there's also a lot of stories of resilience, a lot of stories of humans overcoming insurmountable obstacles to protect the things that they love and they care about, or the people that they love and they care about. And so I'm sure that this is going to be a really good book. It's based on the true story of Auschwitz prisoner Dita Kraus. So I think it's going to be a moving read. After that, I have a book I'm so excited about, and that is Deacon King Kong by James McBride. I found this on my trip to San Diego. You'll see the book haul coming up later this week, and I snatched it up quick. This is a book I've been wanting to read for a really long time. Another book I've heard really good things about. It is an Oprah's Book Club 2020 pick. I don't always love Oprah's Book Club picks, but typically speaking, I think she does a pretty good job of picking books, and combined with the feedback I've heard from other people that I trust, I'm sure I'm going to love this. This is about a deacon who is called Sportscoat, I believe. Yeah, Sportscoat. And in 1969, he walks into a church and shoots the biggest drug dealer in the area. This book deals with the aftermath, not only with the deacon himself and the police, but also within the Black and Latinx communities, within the mafia. A whole bunch of different people are affected, and I think this book shows how this one simple act trickles into a much larger spectrum. Really looking forward to it. After that, I have another book I'm super stoked on. This, I'm telling you guys, this TBR, I'm so excited about every book. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. I have Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. So I have been on a science fiction kick over the summer. I originally thought that science fiction was really not my jam. I do really like Star Trek, and I have enjoyed Star Wars, but it's really the only context I have for sci-fi. Other than that, I really think of sci-fi as being just this cliche, like aliens. I don't know what I imagined sci-fi in my head, but what I didn't imagine it as was smart, snarky, sarcastic, badass characters, not always aliens, and I'm loving it right now. I have just devoured Blake Crouch's entire catalog of books. I've been working my way through N.K. Jemisin's writing. I've been working my way through Andy Weir's writing. Like, I'm loving it. Give me all the sci-fi recs down below in the comments. In fact, if you are a sci-fi fan, please tell me what books I should be checking out. Let me know. And so Dark Matter is the only book that I haven't read of Blake Crouch's last 3 books. I got Upgrade last month in my Book of the Month box. I've already read it. I got Recursion, already read it. I enjoyed both, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this one. This, from what I remember, is about a guy who is essentially kidnapped, and he is turned into like a smarter person, and his whole life has changed. So he remembers being married and having kids. He wakes up from this kidnapping, and all of a sudden he's not married to the same person. He doesn't have kids anymore. His IQ is way higher, and he kind of has to figure out like what's happening to him, what reality is, and then escape, I think, the people that are trying to use him for whatever nefarious reasons. Sounds super good. I am very excited about Blake Crouch's writing at the moment, so I'm sure I'm going to enjoy this. Then I have more science fiction, The Martian by Andy Weir. This book I've heard really good things about as well, and it features a astronaut who is stuck on Mars. He becomes the first person to walk on Mars, and then a big storm happens, and it kills all his crewmates and destroys the equipment. He's cut off from communication with NASA, and he's essentially just like left all on his own out on Mars. So, you know, that's pretty much a death sentence, but he decides that he's gonna survive. He decides to be self-sufficient, try to reconnect with NASA. He's trying to put himself in a situation in which he may be able to survive until he can be rescued, or he may be able to escape. I've heard good things. I think this was also made into a movie, if I remember correctly. After that, I have what I'm sure is going to be a huge tearjerker, and that is Dear Edward by Anne Napolitano. This is the Read with Jenna edition, but this was also a Book of the Month pick a while back. One of my friends on Instagram, Literature and Libations, mentioned this book to me and said it was one of her favorite reads. I think we have a lot of taste in common, so I'm going to take her recommendation on it. This is about a 12-year-old boy who is on a plane with his family. The plane crashes, and he is the only survivor. Everyone else dies. And he becomes famous for this plane crash and for surviving it. But he's in this world where he's isolated. His whole family's gone. Everybody he loves disappears overnight. And he dealt with this horribly tragic thing, and now he's kind of like under the microscope dealing with these traumatic emotions. I am not looking forward to reading this in the sense that I'm excited to read about something sad, but I am excited about the emotional impact that it might provoke. I am excited to read well-written but tragic story. Dear Edward is up at the top of the list for the month. Next on my list is Long Bright River by Liz Moore. This book is kind of my suspense thriller, true crime sort of a book for the month, and this is about 2 sisters. One is a drug addict and one is a cop. They have fallen out of touch because obviously the career conflicts with the drug addiction. But the cop sister kind of keeps an eye on the drug addicted sister, even though she's not actively involved in her life. She's aware of what's going on with her, aware that she's alive, and when the drug addicted sister goes missing, after a spate of sketchy missing person reports and things like that, sister kicks into action. She's gonna find her, find out what happened to her. And cop sister is risking her job, risking the safety of her 4-year-old child, and everything to try to find out what happened to her sister. I've heard good things. This is a Book of the Month book. I usually tend to like probably about 80% of the selections that Book of the Month picks, so I think that's a fairly promising metric for me. I think this is going to be a really good read. After that, I have Half Sick of Shadows by Laura Sebastian. This is a Camelot retelling, or King Arthur retelling. So it focuses in on Elaine of Shalott. And Elaine has the ability to see the future to some degree. And she knows what's going to happen to Morgana, to Arthur, and everybody else in the story. And you have to kind of see what she's going to do. Is she going to cross boundaries to protect her friends and change the course of history? Or is she going to stand back and let things happen as they're foretold? I haven't heard a ton about this. This was a Book of the Month pick, I believe, in 2021. I love fantasy. I want to see what this is about. Hopefully it's going to be a good read. Next up is A River Enchanted by Rebecca Ross. I am buddy reading this with a group of friends over on Instagram. I joined a group on Instagram that is specifically targeted at reading our book of the month selections. Just catching up, because so many people order book of the month and then you already have a bunch of books to read, so those go on your shelves and then you forget about them, and then you get 3 more the next month and 3 more the next month and 3 more the next month. So the goal is, to slowly chip away at that backlog of book of the month books. So we're buddy reading this. There's like 10 of us, I think, that are going to get into it. Super excited. I was very excited when I picked this book. I'm still very excited about it. This is featuring a character named Jack, and he is a bard. He's been living away from home, and then Adira, the leader of his community, summons him home because several girls have gone missing, and she thinks Jack might be able to help her find them. There is a magical element. There's elemental spirits that are somehow connected to these missing children, and there's also a rival community that had been enemies up until this point, and I think it's called Brecken. Brecken suddenly opens channels of communication with Cadence, and it's just kind of weird timing. I believe that there's some secrets that are going to come to light that cause a whole bunch of stuff to happen. Everyone that I know that's actually read this so far has really enjoyed it. I'm sure I will as well. And then, taking a little break from fantasy, sci-fi, etc., I'm going to jump into a non-fiction pick, and that is Tell Me Everything, the story of Private Investigation by Erica Krause. So, Erica Krause becomes a private investigator without any experience, and she is offered a case investigating a situation where a young woman was assaulted at a party by a bunch of football players and football recruits. Erica is worried about taking on this case because she has her own history with sexual assault, thinks she might be triggered, but she decides to take it on anyways, and believe that things don't quite turn out exactly how she plans. So over the next 5 years, Erica learns everything she can about being a PI, tracking down witnesses, and investigating a culture of sexual assault and harassment ingrained in the university's football program. But as the investigation grows into a national scandal and a historic civil rights case, Erica finds herself increasingly consumed. When the case and her life both implode at the same time, Erica must figure out how to help win the case without losing herself. So my mom picked this for one of her book of the month boxes and really loved this book. So it was really well written, thought-provoking, very interesting. Obviously a very difficult topic because it's dealing with sexual assault, but I think it's really important to read these stories about difficult topics. I think it's important to acknowledge that, sexual assault is still a really big problem worldwide. I think, shying away from these stories because they're difficult does a disservice to the victims. I think it's, important for us to be aware of what happens, how it happens, and to not let these assholes that assault women just quietly sneak off. They should be held accountable. So I'm, again, not necessarily looking forward to reading this because I know it'll be a difficult book, but I think it will be a really good and poignant read. After that, I have The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. Like I said, I'm on this big sci-fi kick. I'm reading all the sci-fi right now. This I picked up at a used bookstore. I happened to stop in. This was the only book that I found that I wanted, and I was surprised when I got home and found out it was a signed copy. So excited to have a signed copy of this. This book is very interesting. It is basically about the soul of a city, and I'm going to read you this little quote because I think that describes the book well. Every great city has a soul. Some are ancient as myths, and others are as new and destructive as children. New York City, she's got 6. So I think this is the story of New York City told through the perspective of 6 different characters, and New York is incidentally one of my favorite cities. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I love the background of the city. I love the writer. I love the concept of a city having a soul. I'm here for this. Next up on my list is Winter Counts by David Heska Wambley-Whiten. Hopefully I have pronounced that correctly. This book features a character named Virgil Wounded Horse. He is a local enforcer on a reservation. So basically when federal law fails and tribal council fails to provide justice for a victim of a crime, he steps in and he offers up a sort of like vigilante style justice. When heroin makes its way onto the reservation, and in particular when it makes its way to his nephew, Virgil goes on a rampage to try to find out what has happened and how heroin is being trafficked. He ends up teaming up with his ex-girlfriend, and they make their way to Denver, and they find that drug cartels are rapidly expanding and forming new and terrifying alliances. I think on the reservation there's some questions about some tribal council initiatives that are a little uncomfortable in regards to like money and power and maybe a little bit sketchy. So Virgil is starting to link all of this stuff together, and in order to really deal with all of this, I think he has to deal with like his own demons and his own identity as a Native American man. I haven't heard a whole lot about this book. I know it was a book of the month choice at one point, and honestly, I don't know. I haven't met anyone that's read it or like talked to anyone that's read it, but it sounds amazing. It sounds like it's going to be like a high octane, taken sort of a thriller. I'm really looking forward to getting into it. I think it's going to be a really unique and interesting read. And honestly, in some ways, it kind of like reminds me of Firekeeper's Daughter, because that also deals with drugs being trafficked into an Indian reservation. However, I think this is, because this is geared towards adult readers instead of young adult, I think this is going to be like grittier and darker, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. I think I'm going to enjoy this. After that, I have The Bad Muslim Discount by Syed M. Masood. This features two different characters. There is a young man named Anwar and a young woman named Safwa. Anwar is from Karachi, Pakistan, and Safwa is from Baghdad. And they're both living in the United States, and I think it's kind of their perception of their families, their religion, and what it means to be a good or a bad Muslim. I am really interested in this because the reviews on it are really mixed. So some people think that it is an excellent portrayal of people who come from a specific background and how there are differing levels of fervency and belief in terms of religion. I read a lot of reviews where people are like, oh, thank you for showing somebody that's like a moderate Muslim or who's not that into religion but comes from, a Muslim background. And then I saw other people that were very critical, and they were like, they portray all the devout people as crazy and, stereotypical. So I'm really curious to see kind of where this lies for myself. I love books that explore like topics like religion and culture. And next up is a book that is absolutely gorgeous. I'm just in love with this cover, and that is The Library of Legends by Janie Chang. This is another book of the month book. This is from April of 2020, and it sounds so interesting. Take some moments from actual history, but then kind of combines them with a folklore fantasy style tale. So I'm really interested in reading this. It's set in 1937 in Nanking, China, after Japan begins bombing the city of Nanking. So Lian and her classmates are ordered to flee from the city of Nanking. And as they flee, they're given a collection of 500-year-old myths and folklore known as the Library of Legends. They're responsible for it. As they flee on foot, Lian begins to build some friendships, and she kind of starts to have some romantic feelings towards Liu Xiaoming, who is wealthy and handsome. But after one of her classmates is murdered and another is arrested, Lian realizes that she must escape before a family secret puts her in danger. On the journey, Lian learns of the connection between her two companions and a tale from the Library of Legends. This sounds so unique. I love, like I said, that this mixes history with some fantasy elements and some folklore. I cannot wait to dig into this. I think it's going to be really good. After that, I have a book that I won through Goodreads. It just released, and it is a gorgeous book as well. That is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty. This is about teens, 4 adults. They're recently aged out of the foster care system, and they're living in Vacaville, Indiana. Vacaville is struggling because the auto industry has kind of abandoned it, so there's a lot of people there that are not doing that well. And these 4 recently aged out of foster care young adults are living in an apartment together. The book focuses in on Blandine, and Blandine is struggling. She's plagued by the structures, the people, the places that all not only failed her but actively harmed her. She wants an escape, a true bodily escape like the mystics describe in the books she reads. Set across 1 week and culminating in a shocking act of violence, The Rabbit Hutch chronicles a town on the brink desperate for rebirth. How far will its residents, especially Blandine, go to achieve it? I think this is going to be pretty tragic and sad as well, but also something that it seems a bit realistic. I've had a couple friends that have grown up in foster care. I know the process of aging out of the system can be very difficult if you don't have support, you don't have someone to help you navigate post-system. And, that's on top of dealing with all the trauma that most of these kids have been through in their lifetime. So this sounds like it's going to be very realistic, very sad, but also I think it's going to be really good. And then we have another break from fiction for a moment, and that is Notes on a Silencing by Lacey Crawford. This is a memoir about Lacey Crawford's own personal experience. Basically, the St. Paul's school comes under state investigation because there's allegations of sexual abuse. Lacey went there and had thought that she had packed away all of her issues and everything that happened to her, but these reports bring forth a whole bunch of stuff. Her criminal complaint is reopened, and it, obviously goes into the allegations against the school, what happened to Lacey, what happened to all these other girls, and at this point, Lacey is already a wife, a mother, and a writer living on the other side of the country. She's, now got to decide basically if she wants to go back and deal with all of this. After that, we have Things We Lost to the Water by Eric Nguyen. This is about a family that moves to New Orleans from Vietnam. Mom's name is Wong, and she moves to New Orleans with her 2 sons in 1979. She leaves her husband Kong back in Vietnam, hoping that he'll be able to join later. Eventually, it becomes apparent that Kong is never going to be joining them in New Orleans, and it kind of discusses what the mom and 2 sons do to kind of assimilate into New Orleans life. So Mom Huang gets involved with a Vietnamese car salesman who is also new in town. Tuan tries to connect with his heritage by joining a local Vietnamese gang, and Bin, now going by Ben, embraces his adopted homeland and his burgeoning sexuality. Their search for identity as individuals and as a family threatens to tear them apart until disaster strikes the city they now call home, and they are suddenly forced to find a new way to come together and honor the ties that bind them. This is going to be a very good read, I think. I feel very strongly about reading immigrant stories. After that, I have The Child Finder by Renee Denfeld. I am so friggin' excited about this book. Renee Denfeld wrote a book called The Enchanted, and it is about death row. There's 3 perspectives in that book. There's the murderer that's on death row, there's an investigator, and then there's a priest. And this story that she wrote is just so beautiful. It goes back and forth between these 3 POVs, but it's written in just this stunning way. One of my favorite all-time books. So when I saw this book by Renee Denfeld, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get it, and I have to read it immediately. This is about a woman who investigates missing children. She was once a missing child herself, so she has a special connection to these kids, and essentially she's called in on an investigation for this girl named Madison Culver, who disappeared 3 years ago when her family was choosing a Christmas tree. This is going to be something that requires relentless pursuit. She's slowly going to uncover the truth behind Madison's disappearance, and as she does so, shards of a dark dream pierce the defenses that have protected her, reminding her of a terrible loss that she feels but cannot remember. If she finds Madison, will Naomi ultimately unlock the secrets of her own life? I think this is going to be really good. I love Renee Denfeld's writing. My mom actually has already read this, and she said it wasn't quite as good as The Enchanted, but still a good read. So I'm sure I'm going to enjoy it. Next up is a book that's very interesting for me for a multitude of reasons, and that is Booth by Karen Joy Fowler. This actually follows the Booth family. If you're unfamiliar with who the Booth family is, Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth while he was watching a theater performance. John Wilkes Booth snuck into his private box, shot him in the back of the head. It was a politically motivated thing. He didn't believe in many of the things that Lincoln was doing, like freeing the slaves, and this book, I believe, delves into a lot of that. So it's historical fiction, but it is... The reason that it's unique to me is that, I read a lot of historical fiction, but I don't read a lot of historical fiction from this time period. I mentioned earlier, typically read, World War II and more recent. So going this far back is very unique for me. And I haven't read anything about the Booth family. I haven't read anything really about John Wilkes Booth in general. I'm only really familiar with this piece of history because it's, a required piece of learning in high school. When we're doing national history, basically. So while I understand the inspiration for it, I don't know anything aside from the very basics. So I feel like this is going to be really interesting. It digs into his family life. I believe there was 10 siblings in total, and his parents and politics and all of that. I think this is going to be a great read, and I think I may actually learn some things from it. I know it's fiction, but often with historical fiction, truth is incorporated in a the fictional story is where they fill in all the pieces in between the things that we know are historically accurate. So I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be an interesting read. And then we have The Last Story of Mina Lee by Nancy Joyoon Kim. This is a Reese's book club pick. I have pretty decent luck with Reese's Book Club picks. I want to say it's a little lower than Book of the Month for me, but usually I find their picks are pretty solid as well. So this particular book is about Margot, and Margot's mom, Mina, is not answering her calls. When she finally gets up and goes and checks on her mom, she finds that her mother is dead. And that discovery sends Margot off on a path to finding out more about her mother. Her mom was a Korean War orphan and an undocumented immigrant, and in her search for this information about her mother, she realizes how very little she knew about her. I've heard really good things about this book. I think this is going to be a great read. Probably a sad read too, but I'm looking forward to it. And the final book on my TBR is The Priory of the Orange Tree. I actually am already about 150 pages into this book. I am really enjoying it so far. I would describe this, I don't know if I can give a quick summary of this, but I would describe this as similar to Game of Thrones in that there are many POV characters, there's a lot of secondary characters, and they're all spread out in a bunch of different lands. There's competing religions, there's dragons and worms, there's a whole argument about religious philosophy and politics, a whole bunch of different stuff. There's a plague in one area. There's just a hell of a lot going on, but I'm really enjoying it so far. I'm kind of just getting through the part of kind of where everything's getting set up. So I know that there's a character named Queen Sabran who is the head of one religion. She is from a lineage that is promised to protect the kingdoms from the Nameless One, who is the ultimate baddie worm, and all the other worms that were attacking the kingdoms before. So for 1,000 years, those worms have been gone, and that is accredited to Sabran's lineage. And supposedly, as long as Sabran's lineage is in power, the Nameless One cannot return. However, even though Sabran's still in charge, the worms have been waking up. They've been attacking remote places in the kingdom, and now they're starting to come more inland towards Sabran's empire. The religion that Sabran believes in has been spread to some of the neighboring communities, and it seems like it might have been a bit forcefully. There are communities within the story that do not practice her particular brand of religion, but if you even question it or talk about myths or religion that existed prior to her, she doesn't even want to hear about it. There's one point where a character starts talking about a story that she was told that is kind of like an origin story for part of the religion, and Sabran is angry with her for telling this outdated story, I guess. Then there's Eid, who is on the same chunk of land as Sabran. So Eid is actually from where the Priory of the Orange Tree is, and she is essentially a lady-in-waiting for Sabran. However, Eid has some super secret badass powers that Sabran is not aware of. She has some magical abilities, and she also is a deadly assassin, apparently. She's sneaking around the castle protecting Sabran when Sabran doesn't even realize she's being protected. So it's a very interesting situation there. Then there is a gentleman named Nicholas Rue, who is a disgraced doctor of sorts. He's living on an island. There is a plague on this island, so they don't allow outsiders to come into this island. Nicholas gets wrapped up in a situation in which this gentleman from another island comes to this island and is trying to get in to see that the governor or whatever. And he ends up staying with Nicholas through no choice of Nicholas's. And then they get caught eventually. And so that story is another segment of things that are going on. And then there's a character, I forget her name, who is training to be a dragon rider. So she's gone through this training or the schooling to become a guard member, and then out of all these people that become part of the guard, there's a handful that get selected to ride dragons, and she is competing to have the honor to ride dragons. In this community, dragons are viewed as a good thing. In Sabran's world, dragons are just as evil as the worms. She doesn't see any difference between them, and it's really kind of interesting because it delineates the two cultures very distinctly. You have the people that worship the dragons and ride the dragons and work with the dragons, and then the people that think that anything dragon or worm-like are bad. There's a handful of other characters that started out as side characters or people that were just mentioned that are just starting to become more of main characters within the story. They're starting to get POV chapters, and it's really interesting. There is a lot going on. It is dense for sure. the first 100 pages, especially while you're trying to figure out where all these places are and what all the folklore is and who each person is and how they're all tied together. It is a little overwhelming initially, but kind of in the same way that I felt like Game of Thrones was, where you're introduced to a lot fast, but as soon as you get it in your head, then it's pretty easy to follow. I think the character voices are very distinct and you can easily tell them apart, so I don't find it difficult to like follow the changing POVs. I am really interested to see where this is going because at this point I don't have any idea. I am doing an actual reading vlog on this that's just focused on this one specific book. Because it's so complex, it's so hard to like adequately summarize it in a concise way. So I'm gonna dedicate a whole video to just reading this book, talking about my feelings at different points as I progress. So if you're interested in hearing more about this book, look for that in a couple weeks and you'll get my full reaction to the whole book once it's done. Other than that, that's my whole TBR. I'm so stoked on the books that I have picked for this month. There is not one that I'm like, oh man, I have to read that. These are all books that I think are going to be excellent. I honestly, I'm kind of hoping that there's going to be a record-breaking 5-star month. If you like this video, you know what to do. Hit the thumbs up and comment down below. Let me know what's on your TBR for the month of August. I'm always curious to hear what everyone's reading, so tell me all about it, what you have planned. And if you aren't already subscribed to this channel, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button. I am going forward going to be posting much more regularly. I took a break over the summer to deal with some personal issues, some health issues, and now that those are all taken care of, I have a whole bunch of content recorded and edited and ready to go up. So look for more coming in the week. Thank you again. I'm Caitlin Bandy. This is my channel, Bandy's Books. We'll see you in the next one.